Hello, all, and welcome to another Low Code Cafe. This is episode number 187 for June 25, 2025. I am Dale Warner, head of support for Plantain App. Today I'll be presenting Tokens Unpacked, Managing Data and Context in Plantain App. So we hope when you walk away or hit close on your window, I guess, today you'll have an understanding of the various kinds of tokens in Plantain App and how they work and how long they live and things like that. Um, we'll also talk a little bit about some other stuff, so let's get started. The Low Code Cafe is a monthly webinar that we do. It's done on a Wednesday at 10 a.m. Central Time. It's our opportunity to talk to you, present a topic, help you to understand more about Plantain App and what you can do with it. But sometimes we get demos from the community, and if that's something you'd like to participate in, we'd be happy to have you join. We record all of these and put them out on YouTube. That's why we have all the numbers going up to 187. So lots and lots of very good content stretching back over several years. You can get to that at youtube.com/plantainapp. Today, I'll be doing all of the presenting. We'll be talking about some things from the trenches of support, and then we'll spend most of our time in hands-on low coding talking about tokens. We do hope that you'll engage with us, though. You can use the chat window or the question and answer form. You can raise your hand and we'll recognize you. When it's all over, there's a feedback form, so do engage with us. As I mentioned, we do this monthly, so the next live webinar is scheduled for July 30th. And I guess while we're there, I'll just mention if there's ever topics of interest to you, something that's a great thing to put on the feedback form, things that you're struggling with or would like to see 45 minutes of content on, we'd be happy to put that into the list of things that we will present. So now, from the trenches of support, not a lot to report. Version 1.27 is released. It's a kind of a soft release. I think we're still working on the announcement for it, but it is out and ready to use. Version 126 has been out since June of last year, and I'm going to look at the hotfixes for that here in just a second. I'm not sure if there are any, but also our normal policy is that we support any given version for a year. Since it took us so long to get version 1.27 out, we've extended 1.26. It's going to be X support until December 31 of this year. And then version 1.27 is our standard support window, so it's good until, or will be supported at least until June 16 of 2026. All right, let's see if we can look at the hotfixes. As I say, I'm not sure there are any. Let's take a look. Yeah, so if you're running a 1.26 system, since the last time that we got together and I discussed hot fixes, there was a release, this one for Search Boost. This has to do with making the resilience of a search indexing job. So we are doing specific settings for skipping if running. So if a job is already running, it doesn't try to start it again. And then we set the on misfire of the job to fire now. So if your system was asleep, for example, at the time that the indexing job was supposed to run, it will fire immediately when the system wakes up. So that's available to you. You can install it just as simple as clicking the install button, and I'm going to let that install in the background as we go on. So I mentioned a little bit ago about the support window. We have on our learn.plantainup.com the compatibility guide. I guess I'll include that link here in what I'm about to post. And I'm going to post it now. This shows all the different information about about our different versions and when it was released, when they're supported through the DNN version that we recommend with that, and things like that. The thing I would call your attention to is that in our most recent versions, we have supported SQL Server 2012, but in 1.27, the minimum SQL version required is SQL Server 2016. So if you have an old version of SQL Server, you might have to upgrade before you can take advantage of that. We this is SQL Server is more than 10 years old. This SQL Server 2012, so advancing it to a very common but stable version of SQL Server is was our goal. Anyway, that's all available at learn.plantanapp.com. I'll just mention too that I'm actively working on improving the documentation in learn.plantanapp.com. So hopefully this will become a more and more useful resource for you. Um, so moving on from that. I will also encourage you to join in on the Low Code Campfire, which is done this same hour, but it's every Friday, every week, except, well, when there's holidays, I guess, but 10 a.m. Central Time. This is more of a conversation where we talk about what you're doing with Plant and App and maybe solve problems or provide ideas or discuss ways that the product can be improved. So it's a really great resource. And we're 200 episodes in. We just celebrated 200 episodes this last Friday. If you were there, you got a custom background. So you never know what surprises that we're going to have in Low Code Campfire. I already put the links for this episode on the chat, so you can look for them there. But you can register in advance for that Low Code Campfire. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to Community Portal. The Community Portal is a great place to get questions answered that if you have a support issue, you should post it to support. But oftentimes you're looking for questions. You have questions that can be answered by more than just us. Maybe you want some feedback from the community on something, so that's an opportunity there. And then there's the feedback form. That's a great place to let us know what you'd like to see in the future or what you did or didn't like about a particular episode. So now we'll move on to hands-on low coding. The topic of the day is all about tokens. Tokens is a fairly simple concept, but there are many nuances and places that you can, both extensive ways that you can use them and places that you can get into trouble. And so even as simple a concept as tokens are, I thought it would be very useful to understand the depth of what's there because there's a lot of hidden complexity. So it's easy to learn and hard to master, maybe. Recent support cases, I have kind of revealed a need for why I need to talk about it because trying to explain all the different ways that they can be used and what and how they can be confusing or places that you can run into trouble. It kind of made me realize that we don't we've never done a cafe on tokens, so it's worth doing. There are different types of tokens. The main division line is that there's these core tokens, which also include custom tokens. And then there are context tokens, so explaining the difference, what those are, and we'll go from there. They're created differently. Some are provided by whatever module that you're using. Others are created by actions that you, as a low-code developer, create. So they get created differently. They have different life cycles, but trying to understand how long things live and why they're not there for you when you're trying to use them again later. That's life cycle is important. Performance or caching comes into effect. There are certain places where it's great to use caching, and so hopefully we'll get to that part as well, and some common patterns in how tokens can be used, just to give you some ideas. So lots going on there, and so let's dive in. So first, I guess, is what are tokens, and they're just to kind of put it simplistically, they are always a way to retrieve information. Anytime you use a token, you're going to get something back. Now, something might be an empty string, but you always get something back when you run a token. And then sometimes the token is a way to invoke logic. It can, whether it's to store some information, to execute a piece of logic, you can like a workflow or other things, a database query. That can be used to invoke logic, but you're always going to get something back. Um, why are they important? Well, probably if you're familiar with any programming language at all, these are your variables, the place that you, as you're doing your custom logic, that you store things in one step and then um, use it in another step. And then they allow easy access to a wide range of information about the server, information about the page that you're on, um, lots and lots of different information. We'll kind of show you where to look to understand that. And so the common use cases, again, you can store information in one step or from one action, and then you use it in a later step. So, for example, you create a PDF in one step. The PDF, the URL to the PDF is now available to you after you create it, but you've got to communicate that to your user. So that's that information is available for you to use in a later step. Another use case is to get information. So you can find out about the user, what their username is, what page they're on, what query, what um, parameters are on the query string so that you can react to that. You can find date and time information, lots and lots of information there. And then maybe logically and within your app, you might have application settings or get access to your data. And again, I mentioned you can use these to trigger logic. So lots and lots of different kinds of uses. Tokens come from two main, several different places. Let's start with core tokens. And maybe it's time to start looking at the product a little bit so you can understand it. So the first place is in our configuration menu. There are core tokens and custom tokens. And so let's take a look at this. We'll close out our hotfixes window and keep with this. So within our product, we have, and I just have a pretty much empty app here. We have the configuration menu. That's the normal place where Plant an App app builder module is stored. And so down on the left, we have tokens. So this is the place that I mean when we talk about core tokens and custom tokens. Even on an empty Plant an App, there is always this one at the top that's called core tokens. And this gives you a look at, gives a long list of all the core tokens that are available to you. And it's definitely worth your time to understand what these things do for you. We don't have time to go through them all, and I'd be happy to do that perhaps as a later another webinar at some point in the future. But a common one is user. Anytime that so when you click on one of these, it shows you some of the values that are available and something about how to use it. Down here, there's a test token. So this is a nice interactive spot where you can test out these core tokens and custom tokens. So a common one is the user display name. And so a token is always a bracket and then the name of the token that you want to retrieve and a close bracket. We'll run the test and it will tell you that my display name is Dale Warner. There are other variations like user ID, and the case doesn't matter. I did that for convenience, but user ID is 2. You can, in this test window, you can use many tokens. So another common one is date, time, now. Lots and lots of, and then there's even more. There's formatting, which we won't get into today. But So we can see two tokens, my user ID and the current date and time, at least on the server time here. So these are core tokens available to you, and so it gives you information about the user, the portal that you're on. You can learn things about the browser. You can store and retrieve more things about the user's profile. It has functionality to random pick a random value. Um, Session and cookie is a whole topic in itself. The ability to store information um, in a temporary place for the particular user in question. Uh, Get and query string are essentially the same thing. This is the ability to get information off of the query string, like if there is a parameter ampersand is debug. You can get the value of whether or not debugging is going on for that particular page. So many of these that are available. There is also some security ones. You sometimes need to convert things into base 64 or to convert things into hashes. There's doing math, very useful. And so, for example, we can grab one of these and say that I want 6 plus 1 is 7, minus 2 is 5. This should give us a result of 5. So you can do some math. All right, lots and lots of core tokens, and that's what I'm talking about here in that particular type where they come from. Next, and these are kind of less visible to you and important to know about, is that they can come from modules. And so now we move into this other type, context tokens. When you're working in a form or on a listing, uh, workflows, APIs, any place within the product, there are certain tokens that are available to you uh, that you can use and manipulate, and you didn't have to create them, but they're not part of the core token list. So let's illustrate that a little bit. First of all, um, yeah, let's go find them in learn.plantonapp.com in our documentation. We have some UI components. So I have published a list of these for both forms and listings. And so here under form tokens, there's these list of available special tokens. And so, for example, you can get the current action ID. These all begin with some special character. In this case, there's an underscore in front of them. So hopefully that'll keep them from colliding with the ones that you might use. But let's just illustrate that these show how these come to life. A little bit of low coding here. I am going to create in Planton I'm going to create a page that is going to hold our little demo. So we'll have a new page called demo. We'll make this available to all users of the site, but editable by our administrative roles. And so now if I go into our demo, I am going to create another page called Tokens Workplace. It doesn't really matter what we're calling it. I just need a little place to work here, place to put a form. So we'll make this again available to all users and editable by our administrative roles. So let's go there. If I view the main piece of the site, we now have a demo page and a tokens workplace page. And on this, I'm going to place a form just so we can take a look at it. So put the page into edit mode. We have this extra thing dropped off by our default page, so I don't like it, so I'm going to delete it, the HTML box there. And then we'll add a module called an action form and drop it on the page. New action forms have this proceed to manage form option. We're going to start with a blank form. And so we get the layout. So this is our tokens workplace form. We always like to name things. And what I wanted to illustrate is just that there are values available to buttons. Again, we're back here on tokens that are available from modules. That if we add a field to, I'm just going to call it, I'm going to make this be a text box, and I'm going to call it our output data. But I'm just going to dump things here as just general output of things. I'm going to create, well, with nothing more than that. Yeah, let's add a button. Show the action ID. We will add an action that is, and when you're working with tokens, one of the main actions is create update tokens. And so I am going to create a token that's called output data, the one that I just created. And I am going to take a token off of our learn page, this one here, the current action ID. And so we put a bracket around that, and that's going to go to the output data. In order to keep the page from refreshing, we need to do the update form data Ajax action, and that's it. So we'll save and take a look at this page. Going to go out of edit mode by closing that. And so now we have a button, show the action ID. I click it, I get a 214. If we take a look at our tokens workplace form that we just did and look at the action that was added, note that action number 214 is here. That's the name of the action that was running when current action ID, the underscore current action ID value was accessed. So we didn't do anything to create this, and yet it was present for us. It's present because these special form tokens are available. So you should take a look at the list. I'll put this on the link to the documentation here on the chat. But all of these tokens are available for you when you are doing a form. All right, let me clean up a little bit. We have our page and extra things that I don't need anymore. So that's the second type. We have them coming from configuration, we have them coming from the modules, and then the most common one that you're familiar with, ones that are created by actions, anything that you do that creates a result. So if we look at if we were to add a button, for example, and this is going to be a created by my logic button, and we will do context create update tokens. We still want to push this to our output data, the name of that field on our form. And let's just say that we'll go ahead and do our do math, 1 plus 6 minus 2, just to show that we can consume this token and put it to output data. So output data, if we refresh, we have our new button created by my logic. I made the mistake, right? I didn't do the Ajax on the end. And so the form refreshed. And so it did the math and created it. Probably a better illustration. Let's kind of continue this illustration a little bit. I created a token called output data, but instead I'm going to create one called sum. It doesn't matter what we call it, but a name called sum. Any name that's not used, we can use. And so we get this math result, and maybe we want to do some more math with it. So I'm going to add another create update tokens and put it in the list. So this one is going to be compute sum as our description, and then add 100 to sum is, and I'm going to steal this do math from my clipboard so I know the format. And so now I can say sum plus 100. So we created sum, we add 100 to sum, and then finally we got to get it out onto the screen so that we can see it. So this time I'm just going to clone this action to save me a couple of steps. Send it to output data. And so now output data is going to get the value of sum. So this just shows that we're going step by step, and hopefully if I've done that right, we get 105. So this is that third type then of tokens that get created. You do something in the logic, you can manipulate it along the way, they're created, and now you can output them. So three different types. So now the next big topic with tokens is context. Um, there are uh, let's start with kind of the definition of context. It's a little bit I don't know. We'll see if it's easy to explain or not. A context gets created for you when you start something. It exists for a little while and then it gets destroyed when that thing ends. And so an example of that, a great example, is a workflow. If you think about defining a workflow, it's a discrete piece of logic. It has inputs, it has outputs. Um, so at the time that that workflow runs, that context gets created for you. And that context, now it has all the things that are available from because of the context. Because, for example, a form button is another example of when something starts. You click a button, that starts the context. Throughout that area where the actions are, we refer to those affectionately as action stack. So throughout that action stack, it lives, but when it hits the bottom of the action stack or terminates, that context gets destroyed. It ends and is no longer available to you. So uh, that's a context. By the way, any questions along the way, I do my best to explain, but I'm not sure I get it perfect. So if there's questions, jump in or raise your hand. Um, so every forums is the area where most people run into trouble on context, and we'll spend a little time talking about that. But um, other um, areas within the product are relatively straightforward. So let's deal with the straightforward one first, and then um, we'll get into the complex ones, forms particularly. So we do a workflow, we're going to create a new workflow, and we're going to call it demo context. The input, I'm going to have it be value 1, which is going to be a number, not a phone number, just a number, and value 2. And that will also be a number. So we have two inputs. We have our process that happens. I always like to just create an end start and end. And then the output is going to be sum. And I'm going to give it the value of my sum. Doesn't matter. I'm anticipating that I'm going to create a context token called my sum before we get done. So I'm going to do that there. So the process then is, again, our favorite context create update tokens. It's the tokens that we're going to create is called my sum, and it's going to happen using our same do math, except instead of doing constants, we're going to use. Notice, by the way, that our new user interface has this type ahead. So I typed a V. It gives me access to tokens that are here in my context. Most of the time they'll be there for you. So I'm going to say value 1 plus, and then I'm going to type a V, and we have value 2. So I'll click that. So do math, the core token do math, is going to take my context token value 1 and context token value 2 and put that into a new token called my sum. And because I am outputting my sum here into sum, this is going to give us a little math output. So we give an output. So from a context standpoint, before I click run, there is no context that exists. At the moment that I click run, a context has been created, populated with value 1 of 50, a value 2 of 75, the input. The context exists throughout my process, how I can use value 1, value 2, and my sum throughout this process. But as soon as it hits end, this the values are output, and then that context no longer exists. It's destroyed, and it will not have any. It's gone. It can't have impact on anything else. Sometimes in a workflow, you'll call another workflow or have other things happen here on this line, and we'll get into that in a minute. That context is separate. It gets created and exists and destroyed separately. All right, let's see where I am. I did the easy one, workflows. Let's do the harder one, forms. So this is the same form we were working with a minute ago. And so on the click of a button, whatever button gets clicked, at that instant, context gets created. The context gets loaded up with all of those values that are coming from the form, the listing of things that form automatically has available to you. Um, it gets created at this point, so nothing from any other context exists. Only this context exists from the start of the action until the end of the action, and then it's destroyed. So we created um, output data. Well, let's do the other example. It's a little bit better one. We created this sum. We did some more manipulation to it. It exists right up through the end here. We're storing the output onto the form itself. So this is, I guess this is another, we're accessing it, treating it like it's a token, but because we're on forms, it gets stored on the form. If the name matches up, if the name of a token matches up to anything that's on the form, it gets stored in the form. And then we do this update the form to get it to appear. At this point, as soon as update form Ajax is over, this context ceases to exist. Because we stored things in a form variable, this output data, The form now takes care of keeping this for us. It's a special purpose. It's what forms are all about. So now on to the complexity and a common place where users have problems. On forms, there are events that happen um, that when a page loads for the first time, you can have actions. When the form, and you can read more about these over here, when the form gets pre-initialized and initialized, all of these um, events that take place happen in a context. At the point when the on init is finished, the context is destroyed. And this is the place where people get into trouble because if you develop a value here, any kind of context variable, unless you push it to some field on the form, it will cease to exist at that point. And so the confusion, the common mistake is that you've created a value here. Let's try it. We're going to context create an update token. The value is going to be called um, my pre-init token. Doesn't matter what we call it. This token exists throughout this context, and you could use it here, and you can use it here. You can even put it as an initial value of a field. Oops, I'm in the wrong spot. So a field could have initial value that is based on that token. But as soon as this completes, as soon as your initialization events are done, it's gone. And so it is not available on for any button. And so if I were to add a button that is all about, let's say the button purpose is show my pre-init token, we'll try and use it, but it won't work. Create update token. We want to put my pre-init token in our output data and not forget the Ajax. So this is something that's not going to work. Show my pre-init token, and you get my pre-init token. At the point where where the show my pre-init token button works, is clicked, context gets created for the on-click handler. At that point, any my pre-init token wasn't created, it doesn't exist, so it's not something that, I mean, when we try to use it, it gets the default value, and we'll talk about this later. But um, this, when you have a token that doesn't exist, a simple token like this, it that's the value that's returned, an unexpanded my pre-init token. Okay, so that's a common mistake. And I guess since I showed you the mistake, I should show you the solution. If you are creating something that you want to keep this, describing this here a little bit, if you want to keep it, you have to find a place for it on the form. You can put it on a field. You can create a field by this name, and it will store it on the form. That way, it'll be available in a later step. So let's do just that. If I create a field called a text type field and call it that, my pre-init token, then when I refresh the page, it exists as a place so that when the init event runs, it is uh, it's stored on the form, and so now we see it. When I click the Show My Pre-init button, which should take this value, I should put it here in output data. And it does, it works. That's because when part of the context of a button is all the fields on the form. So at this point, you get all the default form fields. You also get the form fields. And so um, this value is now available to you. So the common pattern is if you're developing something in on the page load events, you're going to want to find a place for it on the form. A lot of times you don't want to show it, and so one way to do that is instead of choosing text box, you can choose hidden data, hidden field with custom value. Now it has the same behavior, but it doesn't show up on the form. So we don't see it, but we click it, it's there. It was stored on the form. It comes back from the form. It's available to use. So now maybe down to this third topic, how context determines token availability. Each context is isolated. So in that example, the form events was one context. We did the different load events and it existed, but then it was destroyed. It no longer exists. And so it's not available in a later step. Um, and so, another example of that is if you have a form button and it's running and that's a context, you call a workflow. The workflow doesn't get all your form context. It starts with a fresh, clean context that does its work and then um, returns out back values. The workflow context disappears. The form context continues until the bottom of the action stack. So core tokens and custom tokens, trying to differentiate them a little bit. Um, the the life of a core token has nothing to do with the life of a context token. When you have a token that gets evaluated, if it's a core token, it's going to pull it, it's going to evaluate it in that instant. Um, so they're executed when they're called. Um, those core and custom tokens are executed when they get called. They live just for that time while they're called, but they're available anywhere tokens can be used. They're completely different from context tokens. Context tokens, their lifespan is within that particular context, the form button or the workflow execution. Um, and what we just talked about, load and submit, are separate contexts. So the form load and the form buttons are completely separate. And so one example of a token lifespan is while the listing button executes or while the workflow executes. APIs, if you're familiar with them, each time that an API is called from an external source, is one execution of the API, and that is it gets a context when it starts to run. It does its work. The context disappears after the execution. With automations, much the same. That whatever event triggers the creation of the execution of the job or the automation, context gets created at the point that that trigger runs, and then when it hits the bottom of the actions that are associated with the action with the automation, then that context gets destroyed and does not live on. So back to they're created when any of those things start, and they're destroyed when it ends. So some of this is reiteration. Exactly, we already talked about this one. So contexts are isolated. They keep your tokens separate. So why does it matter? And if there were no isolation, everything would just be in a big stack. You'd have a form, you'd click a button, it would have a context, you could do things in that, and then you run a workflow. And if there were no isolation, the workflow would create things, it would come back to the form. You'd end up with this big stack of variables, and you don't really know which item contributed it, why it has the value it had. It would be very, very hard to debug, and it could become very, very confusing. So this isolation takes care of that confusion. You can count on when a context gets created, when it gets destroyed. Um, so here's a scenario of parent-child workflows and the context boundaries. You have a workflow that creates a token called total. So that's workflow A. You have workflow B that could also compute a total. Those contexts are completely separate. So while B is running, it cannot see the context of workflow A. It can have things the same name. You have to worry about keeping context names separate only within the workflow B. You have to understand when you're working on workflow B what total means, but you don't have to worry about is there a total from workflow A. Neither impacts the others, and the values of one are not accessible by the other unless you explicitly pass them through input and outputs. So that gets into strategies for safe cross-contact token usage. If workflow A needs workflow B's total, then workflow B can provide that as an output, and workflow A can get that output, call it something that makes sense within workflow A, and manipulate them. So values can be passed, but you have to do it yourself. So this is kind of saying the same thing in another way or with other words. You want to, if you um, want to use tokens in a different context, you should pass them. Most commonly with inputs and outputs, but there are other ways to pass things. So let's say if a form opens up a pop-up form, now you have two different forms, and the pop-up form has a different context. You can pass the values by way of the query string parameter. The the open form pop-up action has the ability to provide query strings, and so you can send those values to the pop-up explicitly. And then the pop-up can use, in its initialization events, can use the get or query string functions to get the value being passed back. So you're explicitly passing it. And then the other example that I've already mentioned, workflows define inputs and outputs, and you can pass things back and forth that way. Um, so let's get into some patterns that are kind of useful, and constant tokens are a great um, value in this area. Things that you can define once and then use in many places. So let's say if your application has an external account with some other provider, SendGrid or Constant Contact or whatever, it would be possible for you in every place that you use the actions having to do with SendGrid that you encode your user ID and password there. But if it changes, now you have to know all the different places that you have used that. So define once, use many is a great pattern. So let's see how that works. If you go into tokens, and let's say that we will create a new token, and this is the starting point here. So we will um, say that we want a new namespace, and I'm going to call it the demo namespace. I'm going to click available on all portals. We're heading towards everything always being available on all portals. So best if you just check that. And create, we now have a demo namespace. We can add a token and let's call it account number. Actually, I'm going to call it account ID and we'll give a description. This is my SendGrid account ID. I'm going to pick as a constant token and it's going to be a 2, 3, 5. That's um, my token information. We can click Save and Test, and it automatically comes out, shows you the form of the token and the output of the token. So now we have the demo account ID token, value A12345. Let's, in our same one here, let's add another token called SendGrid password, and it is also a constant token. We'll give it a password that nobody can possibly guess, and we'll save and test that. And so now, anywhere that we want to log in with SendGrid, we can use the demo SendGrid password and the demo account ID, excuse me, token, and those will get resolved when you use them in the form. So just to demonstrate that, if I can say, I'll add another button to my test form that says show SendGrid credentials. And again, we will use our favorite tool, create and update tokens. It's going to be to output data, the form field output data. And we're going to show the account and the password. Refresh so we can see our new button. So when I click show SendGrid credentials, Patrick, I miss you. Forgot to put in the Ajax. So now those credentials are coming out of the constant tokens we defined in tokens and being displayed. So they're available for us to use anywhere. And yet we can go back and change them. And if our password changes, we can save it in one place. And then when we use it, it's 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 changed throughout, so we don't have to go hunt down the code places that are where all the different places that those tokens were used. So that's a really great pattern, a reason that you would use constant tokens. There's another less common use, but it's a good token pattern, and that would be to define the output format for something. And so this would then allow you to change um, the change this output format. And I'll have just enough time to let's see what else we've got before I spend the time on that. I'll just mention this one, right? This is a good one. If you nope, this is worth doing. Let's do it. Maybe we'll have to have a part 2 to this one. Um, let's say that we want to produce a list of users on our system, and we want to, we're going to define a flexible way to output them. I'm going to set this up, and then we'll do this as part of our demo. I'm going to create a new one called user template, and the definition of it is going to be a constant. And the content is going to be, I'm going to use an HTML element called li. So I'm going to have an open and a close li. And the content of this is going to be user, this will be display name. And then I'm going to put another token in here called user list. display name. So I'm anticipating that when I use this, I'm going to have created this token user list display name, and it's going to display it as an LI item. So now this demo user template token can be used for that purpose. So let's quickly create that. We're going to add a button that's going to be user list, and it's going to do some things. We're going to do create list from SQL. The um, list that we're going to create, and this is key, this matches up what we were doing a minute ago, is going to be user list. We're going to create the user list here, and it's going to come from selecting everything from users, a common table in the DNN ecosystem. All of our users are there. So now we have a user list, and I am going to add a for each. So execute actions for each list entry, and I'm going to be processing the user list. I like to put that in the description just so that I can remember what I'm doing. So I'm going, but this actually does something. The list that we're processing is user list. We're going to create a token called output. So create update tokens, create the output, and so output is going to get the value of demo user template. This is where we're going to be consuming our template. But since we want it to be additive for each time through, we want to add to the end of the user list. So we're going to say that whatever the value of output was before, we're going to add on this template, whatever that is. So output will keep building every time through this action list, actions that happen on everything through the on each entry in the list, we're going to add to the output. We need to start off with output having some value. So we will use the create update tokens above that to initialize output. And so output is going to get the value of the user list is, and then I'm going to open my unordered list with a UL. So output starts off having the value, and then we for each through it. Each time through, we append to output to get the demo template. And then at the end, after all the actions are done, we kind of have to clean up a little bit. So let's go back. I'm just going to clone this one that we've already have. We need to finalize output. And so output is going to be whatever the output was from above plus a closing UL. One more time, we'll do an AJAX. And the trick we're going to use to get this on the screen is that we will add a field, the static text field type. We're going to call it output, and this will support displaying our HTML. So now I've intentionally made a mistake, so don't laugh when you see this, but we now have our button, show the user list, and when we I didn't do a good job on my SQL. That wasn't the intentional one. So let's look at the SQL. Select everything from users. That was important. So now we see the user list is, and then display name. And notice this hasn't been evaluated. This is our template that's coming from the token. Well, it wasn't evaluated because when we do this for each list item, the create does it takes the output and gets the template and adds to it. But the template is this token structure that we created over in tokens. If we have specified by default one recursion. By saying two recursions, that means that after this gets done, it does it again. So the fact that a token gets returned by this template, now the token will get evaluated. So with that change, we can say show the user list, and now we see that it gets evaluated. The fact that we have a template is kind of cool because we can now manipulate the template here from tokens and say that we also want the user list um, user ID. This is something else that's present in that um, user list. And so when we do that, now we get the user ID showing at the end. So I would encourage you to think about that common format, a common usage of tokens, the ability to define a template that is an output format or a format that you're going to use in some other place. It's a nice, easy to maintain place to put a template that then can get consumed, whether it's only in one place or many places. It's just a nice, easy way to define that thing. Okay, we have spent our hour. I have a few more topics to do. And so for those of you that want to hang on, you're welcome to. If not, this is going to be available in replay. But I want to go ahead and work through my content, so I'll leave that choice up to you. When we talk about token types, the when you're dealing with custom tokens, there's several different types. The types come into play here when you're doing the token definition. There's a change type. These are the different ones that are available to you. So the constant token is the one that we've been dealing with. Just whatever value that you place into the token, that's what's going to get returned. A database query will allow you to manipulate or to retrieve information from and can also manipulate information in your database. It's a SQL query. Razor script allows you to use a language like C# or VB.NET to manipulate and get output well beyond our description of what we can do today to actually get into one of those. But I believe we've covered Razor at a different time. I know recently we've covered this one, Razor Script Experimental. This is our original Razor Script implementation, but Razor Script Experimental provides much more flexibility because we've included the more enhanced Razor web pages syntax. It's a different engine and allows a lot more. I'll just warn you off of this one. HTTP request, obsolete. This was a specialized token that allowed you to go get information from some other system. It would do a HTTP request and return whatever came back, which is useful, but this was introduced long before we had workflows. So now that and everything else is opened up with the run workflow type of token. So when you do a run workflow token, you can pick whatever workflow that you want to do, and you can pass it input and get output from it. And so that HTTP type token is, while that one is no longer well, it's considered obsolete. You should no longer use it. Use the workflow token and do a server request inside the workflow to go get your data. But that opens up many, many more ways to get data and trigger things to happen. And you remember a little while ago when we started, I said that tokens could also be used to trigger logic. The When you do a token definition when you do a token type of, excuse me, a workflow type token, workflows can do anything. They will return some kind of output, but they can take any other kind of action. So just by embedding a token in the correct place in your logic, you can trigger anything else to happen. So those are the different token types. Um, it's important to know because I mean we've been talking about these different types of tokens and knowing that when contexts are there and that they get destroyed, depending on what you're working on, it might be very difficult to. I mean, we don't provide any um, on-screen visibility into what your current context is. Um, So if you, in our case earlier where we were doing the sum and adding values, we could we could do the work and create tokens, but at the um, at the conclusion of it, we outputted the value of sum onto our output data. We could That's the point at which we could see it. We couldn't see it along its way in intermediate steps or any other tokens that got created. And so debugging techniques and understanding how to debug is very useful. Um, there's an action context to JSON array takes all the tokens that you have and puts them into another token that you can then display. So it's a nice way to wrap up all your tokens and display them. And so I'm going to demonstrate that in a minute. And then a couple of tools that are available to you to display that. In forms, and in listings as well, there's a display error message action. So you as a developer can create a button that uses this display error message to display your tokens. The button is only there while you're developing. You remove it or hide it at a later time, but it lets you see what's in there. And then another very common one is the log event action, so that you take whatever you're interested in understanding and doing the log event. So I'm going to do the first two, the context to JSON array action and the display error message action. If we go back to our form that has now uh, two fields, this output data and another hidden output field, or no, it doesn't have any content in it. And then these different buttons. And actually, I'm going to add one more thing to it. I'm going to add a drop-down field just to illustrate a point. This is a simple, I'm just going to call it simple drop-down. And drop-downs come with an item as a data source that have two items in it here. I'm just going to accept that because I really just want to illustrate what goes on with drop-downs. So this is our form now. Not very pretty, but it is. So we have our simple drop-down and it has two items in it. As a debugging, I'm going to add a button called Show Values. And this, again, would be the thing that would be hidden. One way to hide it would be to only show it if get colon is debugging is true. And I'm just going to leave it that way. So um, let's just do that much. I like doing things in increments here. So I've added a new button, but we don't see it. If I come up here and say, whoops, I'm going to say is debugging equal true, then now we have our extra button, show values. So this is a way to hide things, and it also illustrates a great core token. The get is debugging values returned, and whether it's true or false is now being used to show this conditionally. All right, so back to my debugging. We have this action called context to JSON array. And this just returns all the tokens from your current context into an array. And so I'm going to store this in, I'm just going to call the token, I'm going to give it the name of tokens. Maybe for clarity, I'll call it tokens JSON. Great. So it's going to include everything and it's going to exclude and these are our special ones, the ones that I was pointing out earlier. So we're going to exclude all those that begin with underscore and $sign and query string so that we can just focus on the ones that are present. I'm not, just for fun, I'm not going to exclude query string because I think that might be illustrative. And then I'm going to use our display error message and output this tokens JSON. And so when you click the button, it's going to do two things. It's going to take everything and put it into tokens JSON, and then it's going to display it. So this is going to give us our nice functionality. So let's work with our form a little bit. We'll put some output data as ABC, and a simple drop-down is going to, we'll selected the first item. When I click Show Values, the display error message provides this nice red box at the bottom of our form. And then if we look at all the values that are present here, and it's more useful to see these maybe in a nice formatted so I'm going to use something that allows me to format JSON. So the name of everything that was put into our context and the value of it. You can see output data has the value of ABC, and then all our buttons show up with empty values. That's just an interesting thing. That hidden field that we have shows up with the value hello world that we gave it. We have other buttons. The output is blank. Notice our simple drop-down has the value we selected, first item. Show values is a button, so it shows up here as an empty value. But now we see some nice things that you couldn't see before. Simple drop-down text is a token that's in your context that has the value first item. There's another one, simple drop-down path. Simple drop-down value, whether or not it has children. So the simple drop-down, the drop-down functionality creates a lot of tokens in your context that you wouldn't otherwise know that they're there. Query string is debugging gets a value of true. So it picked up things from our query string. This is one way that you can see what's on your query string at the point that you're running it. So let's try one more variation of this. I'm going to add another value here that's going to be called test 456. And so we'll execute that. And then for our simple dropdown, I'm going to pick second item because second item has a different value. So we say show values, get this nice JSON and take a look at it. So now let's where is it? Simple drop-down has the value of it is with different value. The text is second item. So this kind of shows that you can access the different parts, the text or the value of a drop-down. And then down here on our query strings, we can see that the test one that we had, query string test 456, is present. There are, yeah, so I think that's enough to talk about there. So that's like some ways to debug. A run through here on logic, token logic. A token is a context is created. This is all about context lifecycle, right? A context is created. There's the automatic population of module-based tokens, like those special form tokens or special listing tokens. Those get added automatically. And then any actions that you do, anything that you add that adds or updates the context, that is what's in your context. Um, this is an important thing to know, and I'm going to point to when setting a context. When you set a token, it always saves to your context, or in the case of a form, to the form. You can never set one of the core tokens or the constant tokens that you create, the custom tokens that you create. You can't set those, and if you do, if you try, it's going to confuse you substantially. So if you try to save a set of value of a core token, like date time now or username, uh, it's going to save it as a in your context. And so if you try to refer to it in your context later, it's going to have the value that you gave it, but it doesn't save. It still gets destroyed at the end of your context. And uh, you it will appear as though, hey, I tried to set this thing. It didn't set. It looked like it set, but it didn't set. Um, so now I'm looking back. Jim, thanks for correcting my invalid SQL, even though I wasn't paying attention. Um, Jim asked the question, if you'd created a value in the button, would it be in the context debug output? What if I only wanted the button context to be the output, not the form context? There is no way to there is no different way to differentiate between form fields and context. Your form fields get dumped into your context on submit, and anything that you create gets dumped into your context on submit. So there's no inherent way to tell the difference between what came from the form and what came from the your actions. From that's as a an actual matter. As a um, from a technique standpoint, one of the things that you can do is to differentiate. If you always start your form fields with a particular prefix, or more likely, if you were to create the context tokens that you create with a particular prefix, then our show values button has this context of JSON array action has the ability to include prefixes. So if you're focused in, for example, on a particular, let's say that you had tokens that were part of your phase one stuff. If you called those all phase one tokens and they had different suffixes, you could only include phase one, and then you could focus in on the things that happened in those particular tokens, and it would eliminate, not include the ones that were created anywhere else, any other prefixes. So that's one way to focus. And then yeah, so that's I think the answer to that question. There's another question from Fabian. Can you use the token to have a static translation on a multi-languages portal? We need to look at the current language and select the good string. So yeah, I think first of all, let's go back to our special form tokens. Um, I think language is part of this. Yeah, query string language is part of it, so it's there for you automatically. So if you were to if you wanted to create a translation token, and this is a great example to deal with, um, you could use the current language to go get the thing. So without completely doing it, let's see if I can, I can mock this up real quick. Um, we could create a translate token, and let's do this a little bit farther. So let's say that we create a workflow that's called translation. Let's call it forms translation. The input could be a language and um, let's say a key, that every form element has a key. You can define what you want this to be, but it'll look up something and return the value. So if let's say this is it would be first name, the key would be first name. And let's put that as an example here. First name and in US is our default values. So from a process standpoint, you would do something in here. You would use the language that's coming in and the key that's coming in to go look up in a table someplace, and that would be your actions in the middle. I'm not going to do the actions here today. And then the output would be um, translated text. And we would output something, whatever the result of your thinking is. And I'm just going to say, to mock this up, I'm going to say uh, the language with a dash and then the key. And so um, if we save and test this, and the output is going to be whatever we put into it. It's just demonstrating that it's linked up correctly, right? So if you did the work of doing the translation in this middle part, we're good to go. So now how do we consume that? In our tokens, we can add a new token called translate. Definition is a run workflow. The workflow we want to run is form translation, and what we want to get out of it is the translated text. If we save and test this, we can see the format of what we're going to have to call. Anytime that you want to do a translation, you provide uh, the language and the value, and so it could be in S and last name, whatever your keys are, and the translation is going to come. So here's the format of what we need. If we want to mock up doing translation in our form, that let's add a new field. This is going to be a text box, and we will, let's say that what we want to do is it's going to be the first name, but we want to ask that in whatever language the user has. So we're going to use our translate token to do the work, and the we know from our debugging earlier that we can use this token, query string language, to find the language. So instead of hard coding it to English, we'll put a token in here. And the key that we want is first name. So now the workflow is running. We can see we're getting that test output. Um, the fact that we've used this demo translate token, passing in the language of whatever the form is being rendered in, and the key first name there, uh, we get that translation. And then if we work on our um, workflow a little bit and improve it, I mean, again, ideally, you're going to have to do your own lookup here to do that work, but I'll put here translated just to really illustrate that this output is what's coming here. So yes, the answer to the question is token can do a great job at translating a form for you dynamically. Okay, so working through where I was here. Avoid confusion. Don't ever assign a value to a core token. It's going to make you crazy. The rules that happen when you're retrieving a token, remember I said they always return a value. The value might be blank, but they always return a value. When it's retrieving, it usually, I found one or two cases where this isn't true, but usually it retrieves the context, it retrieves it from your current context first. If it doesn't find anything, if there's nothing in your context, then it'll try finding it in any of those special ones that were added to your context. If it doesn't find that, it tries to see if that is a core token. So if it's either a core or a custom token, it'll try and return it from there. If it doesn't find it in any of those places, then you get some other results happen. It returns some default. If it's a simple token, meaning it doesn't have a colon, it's just like this bracket token bracket. It returns uh, the it returns the same look as the token bracket. If it's complex, and this is my terminology for it, I don't know that we have it, but one that's created that has a colon in it, it will return a blank value if there's no default. And then we really haven't talked about defaults, but um, the default for a token, let's demonstrate this. We'll do a one more button here. Show the default. My non-existent token, but I put an equal sign after it and put a whatever the YYY, this is the form of specifying a default. It can be another token or other things, but if in this case, I'm using a constant of YYY. So if this token doesn't exist, then output data is going to get the value of YYY. Uh, did it again. Didn't I make sure I have an Ajax here? I do. So show a default, I get YYY. If there is no default, you get the token itself, my non-existent token. And then finally, just to illustrate the more complex version, if it's my non-existent token colon A, if it has a colon in it, then instead of returning that whole thing, you get blank. So those are two different behaviors. It has to do with templating why you get two different behaviors, but just realize that exists. All right, let's see if I can blow through the rest of these. Um, so we've already talked about some common mistakes with tokens that if you try to assign a value to a core token, it doesn't do what you think it's going to do, and it will confuse you. Another common misunderstanding is if you don't understand when the life cycle starts or gets destroyed, then you'll um, that's going to confuse you, so you need to understand that. And then if you, I just want a kind of a common confusion, and I'll try to give the rule here, is that when you are doing a create update token or anything that has an output token, the correct syntax when you're naming a token is to not use brackets. When you're dealing with a name, don't use brackets. When you're using a value, you want to get the value of a token, that's when you use brackets. Um, if you if you make that mistake and put brackets around a name, it will sometimes work. Um, but that's not the way the language is designed. And your best case is when you're dealing with a name to not to use that unless you explicitly have a reason to. The explicit reason to do that is here on the tokenized token names checkbox. Tokenized token names uh, will try to evaluate. This is like for array handling, and anybody who has ever dealt with array programming, this will this is a way to simulate that. But the simple functionality is that when you click the tokenized token names, the place where something is going to get stored is going to also get evaluated as a token. And so you can, it's a very uncommon functionality, but very powerful if you have the need to use it. I'm going to try to find, still trying to find the end. So avoid those pitfalls. And um, token caching for performance we've dealt with in other places. I'm not going to jump into that today. And so I'll leave it. We'll when you see this in replay, there'll be a summary of the key lessons that were here. One of the things that I kind of mentioned along the way, recommended approaches, is inline documentation. You saw me do some work where I said the name of the token that I'm dealing with, or what the purpose was. By putting just even a cursory amount of documentation in the description line, it will help you remember why you were setting that value, or to see where a value was set. And then you might want to think about how do I want to log um, your tokens. That really is a whole different topic, so we'll let that go. This and more we will cover in the low code campfire on Friday, this same hour. We'll 10 o'clock a.m. Central Time. We'll discuss it. I'll take any questions that you might have out of the whole thing, and so we'll deal with that at that time. Thanks for spending your now hour and a half with us, those of you who hung on. Thanks for doing that. We will see you again in 1 month for another episode of Low Code Cafe, but hopefully in the Low Code Campfire 2 days from now. Thanks, everyone.